You're embarrassing me in front of my real family." Those words from my daughter Emma cut deeper than any blade could. She didn't yell them. No. She leaned close, lips barely moving, but every syllable carried enough poison to burn through the last thread that tied us together. I stood there under the golden light of her engagement party. Chandeliers glittered overhead. Music played softly, and 200 guests in designer suits and gowns filled the Beverly Hills ballroom. They held champagne flutes like they'd been born with them. I, meanwhile, stood in polished work boots that had carried me through 25 years of building this city. Boots I'd shined twice before leaving my small Pasadena home, hoping they would look good enough for her big night. I thought tonight might heal the distance between us. I thought maybe my daughter would look at me and remember the man who raised her after her mother died, the father who packed her lunches, taught her to ride a bike, and worked double shifts to pay for her college. But the moment her eyes flicked to my boots, I saw it. The shame. She smiled for her guests, but her voice dropped into ice. "Dad," she whispered, "try not to draw attention. Tonight is important." "I know," I said, keeping my tone soft. "I just came to celebrate you." She tilted her head, scanning the room filled with money and power. Her fiancé's family was there, the Sterlings, old Beverly Hills wealth. She wanted to prove she belonged to them now. "Belonged," she said once before. That word has stayed in my chest like a lodged nail. One of the Sterling women glided by in a diamond necklace worth more than my house. Emma's smile widened for her, but the moment the woman passed, Emma turned back to me. "You have to stop looking so blue collar." Her eyes slid down my shirt, my hands, the faint lines of callus I could never scrub away. "These people don't understand men like you." I forced a smile. "I didn't come here for them. I came for you." Her jaw tightened. "Then do me a favor and stay near the back, please." I froze. My daughter's words stung, but the humiliation wasn't new. It started years earlier, at her wedding, when she sat me with the catering staff instead of at the family table. "You'll be more comfortable there," she'd told me, as if her own father didn't belong beside her. And then last Christmas she apologized to her in-laws for the rough hands I used to pass the wine. Those wounds hadn't healed. Tonight she drove the knife deeper. I let the silence hang, then asked, "Emma, after everything, doesn't it count for something that I'm your father?" Her eyes darted across the room, making sure no one overheard. Then she leaned closer, her voice sharp enough to slice through the music. "Not anymore, Dad. Not in my world." I felt the words land like a punch to the chest. My world had been her world for 29 years. Late-night homework, hospital visits when she had asthma attacks as a child, saving every penny so she could graduate debt-free. That was my world. Now she was telling me it meant nothing. But instead of crumbling, I smiled. I adjusted the cuff of my shirt, brushed a thumb over my wedding ring, the last piece of her mother I still carried, and nodded as if her rejection were only a passing comment. "Enjoy your night," I said, and I stepped back, just far enough to give her space, just close enough to watch. Because while Emma thought she was building a new kingdom of wealth and connections, she didn't realize she had already broken the foundation it stood on. Her mother's inheritance, the $33 million that turned her into Beverly Hills royalty, came with rules she'd ignored, too blinded by status to notice the trap she was setting for herself. I stayed quiet, my boots planted firm against the marble floor, watching her laugh with strangers who would drop her the second her money vanished. She thought her father was an embarrassment. She thought money meant power. But what Emma didn't know was that her inheritance had conditions, and tonight, in front of 200 witnesses, she had just broken them. To Emma, I was just the man with dirt under his fingernails. That's how she saw me, no matter how many years I spent raising her, no matter how much I sacrificed after her mother passed. I lived in a modest home in Pasadena, nothing flashy, nothing anyone would brag about. A small front yard, a porch where I used to drink coffee before heading to the construction sites. My truck, a 2018 Ford F-150, had 200,000 miles on it, dents in the side, and concrete dust ground so deep into the seats it would never come out. But it ran, and it carried me to work every morning. My steel-toed Red Wing boots, $350 a pair, were the most expensive thing I owned. To Emma, they were a symbol of failure. To me, they were proof that I earned every dollar with sweat and calloused hands. I wanted her to grow up knowing the difference between having money and having worth. That's why I hid the truth about my business, about the empire I had built quietly under the name Wilson. I wanted Emma to value people, not bank accounts. But somewhere along the way, she chose appearances instead. The distance started small. At her wedding 3 years ago, she seated me at a table with the catering staff instead of with family. "Dad, you'll be more comfortable here," she said, tapping the chair with a polite smile. I froze, staring at her as guests in tuxedos and gowns filled the other tables. "Emma, I'm your father," I whispered. She leaned down, her perfume sharp in my nose. "Exactly, that's why I don't want you," feeling out of place. I bit back my anger, sat quietly, and watched my daughter smile for the cameras while her father blended in with the hired help. It didn't stop there. The following Christmas, as we gathered in her Beverly Hills penthouse, she introduced me to her new in-laws. My hands brushed against the wine bottle as I passed it across the table. Her cheeks flushed and she laughed nervously. "Sorry," she said to them. "Dad's worked with concrete his whole life. You can tell." Her words landed heavy, but the laughter around the table drowned out my silence. That penthouse alone was worth nearly $3 million. Designer dresses hung in her closet, each one costing more than the truck I drove. She'd joined a private country club where the membership fee alone was $50,000 a year. She moved among charity boards and cocktail parties like she'd been born into them. And me? I was her shadow. The man she kept tucked at the edges, hidden away, called out only when it was convenient. But I wasn't just standing by. Quietly, I began keeping records, screenshots of her texts where she told friends I didn't understand sophisticated people, photos from gatherings where she placed me with staff instead of family, notes of her cutting words, each one sharper than the last. It wasn't revenge I was thinking about then. It was survival, dignity. One day I knew I might need to prove the truth, that the father she was so ashamed of had never stopped being there, even when she tried to erase me. I let her enjoy her penthouse. I let her spend her inheritance on jewelry, cars, and connections that meant more to her than blood. I stayed patient. I swallowed the insults. But with every slight, I wrote it down. With every public humiliation, I saved the evidence. Because somewhere deep down, I knew Emma's new life was built on sand. And when it finally collapsed, I'd be ready. I kept every message, every photo, every insult. One day, they'd matter. $33 million comes with strings, Emma, strings you chose to ignore. That was the thought running through my mind as I sat in Margaret Davis's office. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. Shelves lined with thick law books towered over us, and the blinds cut long stripes of afternoon sunlight across her desk. It felt like the kind of place where truth couldn't hide. Margaret had been Rebecca's attorney for years, even before my wife passed. A sharp woman in her 50s, gray streaks in her hair, glasses perched low on her nose. She knew the Morrison family's wealth inside and out, the kind of old Philadelphia money that never flaunted itself but controlled entire institutions. I shifted in the leather chair, my calloused hands resting on my knees. Margaret studied me with quiet patience before opening a thick folder stamped with my wife's family crest. "Jake," she said, "you know Emma inherited $33 million last year, but what she may not realize, or chose not to remember, is that this money didn't come without conditions." I frowned. "Conditions?" She nodded. "Your late wife's grandmother, Elizabeth Morrison, was very specific. She lived through the Depression, saw what money could do to people. When she drafted her will, she included clauses to protect the family's values." Margaret adjusted her glasses and read from the papers in front of her. Section 7, Clause 2. Beneficiaries must maintain respectful and supportive relationships with all surviving family members to retain access to funds. I sat back, my chest tightening. Respect, support. Two things Emma had stripped away from me the moment she stepped into her penthouse. Margaret turned another page. Section 12, Clause 4. Any public disrespect, humiliation, or rejection of family members will result in immediate review and potential revocation of benefits. Her eyes met mine. "Jake, these aren't suggestions. They're legally binding." I let it out a bitter laugh. "Then Emma's been violating them from day one." Margaret didn't smile. And that's why we're here. I've been contacted by the Inheritance Review Committee. The what? The committee your wife's grandmother set up to oversee compliance. 3 attorneys, 2 family advisors, and 1 independent mediator. They monitor behavior. If a beneficiary violates terms, the committee decides whether funds are revoked. I felt a strange mixture of anger and relief. For years I had swallowed Emma's insults. For years I let her pretend I was less than the man who raised her. And all this time she'd been walking straight into a trap she didn't even know existed. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of Emma's texts, photos from her wedding, Christmas gatherings, country club lunches, each one proof of her contempt. I slid them across the desk. Margaret leafed through them carefully. Her eyebrows rose as she read the messages, studied the photos, listened to a short audio clip on my phone where Emma whispered, "I'm not proud of what you do." Finally, she closed the folder with a firm hand. "Jake, I need to ask you something." "What's that?" "Do you want to pursue this? Because once the committee begins review, there's no turning back. If they find her in violation, she loses everything. All 33 million, every cent." I stared at the polished floor for a long moment. Memories flooded me. Emma at 5 years old, clinging to my hand on her first day of school. Emma at 12, asking me to help with her science project. Emma at 22, crying on my shoulder after a broken engagement. And Emma now, apologizing for my hands, seating me with staff, telling me I wasn't part of her world. I looked up at Margaret. My voice was steady. "I don't want her money. I never have. I want respect." Margaret gave Tawa's faintest smile. "Then you're pursuing this for the right reasons." She closed the folder, locked it, and set it aside. "The committee will give Emma one final opportunity. She will be notified of the violations. She'll have 72 hours to correct them, specifically to publicly acknowledge and respect your role as her father. If she does, the inheritance remains. If she doesn't—" Margaret spread her hands. "It's gone." My throat felt tight, but my resolve was clear. "That seems fair." Margaret leaned forward. "Jake, you need to understand. This isn't about revenge. It's about principle. Once she's informed, every word, every action in those 72 hours will matter. And the stage where she'll either save or lose everything." She paused. "Is her engagement party?" I drew in a long breath. The chandeliers. The guests. The polished smiles. All of it would come crashing down, depending on how my daughter chose to treat me in front of her new world. Margaret slid her business card toward me. "I'll prepare the paperwork. But Jake, you need to be ready. This could end your relationship with her forever." I pocketed the card. "She made that choice the moment she called me an embarrassment." Margaret's voice softened. "Then let's see what she values more. $33 million, or her father's dignity." I stood, adjusted my jacket, and walked toward the door. "She has one final chance," I said quietly. "In 72 hours, Emma will either honor me or lose everything. Dad, maybe tonight you could say you're retired instead of what you actually do." Emma's words hit me harder than the sharp scent of the cologne and champagne that filled the Beverly Hills Country Club. We stood just inside the marble entrance, chandeliers sparkling above, waiters gliding past in white jackets, the quiet hum of wealth filling the air like background music. I had driven here in my old truck, wearing a freshly pressed shirt, dark jeans, and tie-down. These same polished boots that had carried me through half a lifetime. I thought maybe, just maybe, this night could be the one where she looked at me and remembered I was her father, not her shame. Instead, she slipped a sleek business card into my hand. The words were embossed in gold. Sarah Mitchell, image consultant to Beverly Hills Elite. I raised my eyes to Emma. "What's this?" Her tone was rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. "Dad, you need to understand something. My life has changed. The people I associate with now, they have certain expectations." "Expectations?" I asked. She sighed, frustration edging her voice. "Yes, how you dress, how you talk, how you present yourself, it all matters. If you worked with someone like Sarah, you'd know what to say in these circles. You could pass as retired, or in business development, something respectable." I stared at the card, then at my daughter, the girl I once carried on my shoulders at the county fair, the girl who used to color on my blueprints with crayons. Respectable? I asked quietly. I manage crews of 50 men. I'm responsible for projects worth millions. You don't think that's respectable? Emma's lips pressed tight. She didn't answer. I pressed the card back into her palm. I'm proud of what I do. Her eyes locked on mine, cold and sharp. Well, I'm not. The words cut clean through me. No hesitation, no regret. Just raw truth from her lips. I felt a slow fire build in my chest. Emma, I said, my voice low, I've been your father for 29 years. I raised you after your mother died. Doesn't that count for something? She looked away, scanning the dining room where clusters of polished men and women sipped champagne. Then she leaned close, her voice a whisper laced with shame. Not anymore, Dad. Not in my world. I froze. That sentence was a knife, straight and deliberate. But instead of exploding, I studied her. The $12,000 dress she wore, the designer clutch in her hand, the way her eyes darted toward the Ashworth family at the corner table. Richard Ashworth, silver-haired, owner of an $800 million private equity firm. His wife, Carolyn, chairwoman of 3 charity boards. Their son, Marcus, Harvard-educated and dripping with old money confidence. Emma's gaze lingered on them like a child pressing her face against a toy store window. They were her prize, her ticket into a higher circle. And me? I was the stain that didn't fit her perfect picture. Is that what this is about? I asked, nodding toward the Ashworths. Them? Emma's cheeks flushed. They matter, Dad. You wouldn't understand. The connections they bring, the opportunities. It's a different level. I laughed bitterly. Opportunities? Or approval? Her jaw tightened. You don't get it. You never will. They respect people who've built real success. Real success? I leaned closer, my voice steady. Emma, success isn't measured by who you eat dinner with. It's measured by what you build, what you give, and how you treat people. And right now, you're failing all 3. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the business card between us, as if it were a shield. Just try, Dad, please. Work with Sarah. Learn how to fit in. That's all I'm asking. I shook my head slowly. I don't need to fit in. I need to stand tall. And I won't lie about who I am just to make you feel less ashamed. Her eyes burned with frustration. Why can't you just change for me? Because, I said, voice breaking just enough to betray my hurt. I'm proud enough for both of us. The silence between us grew heavy. The clinking of glasses and polite laughter around us felt like another world entirely. She turned her face away, fixing her smile as if nothing had happened. Fine, she whispered, her tone colder than ever. If you won't change, then don't expect me to keep apologizing for you. I studied her carefully, memorizing the hardness in her expression. Any hope I had left for reconciliation dimmed under the chandelier light. I slipped my hands into my pockets, not trusting them to stay steady. Emma, I said quietly, you've forgotten where you came from, and one day, that's going to cost you. She tilted her chin high, her eyes gleaming with defiance. Not anymore, Dad. Not in my world. 200 guests, 1 father, 1 choice. That's what it felt like as I walked into the ballroom Emma had rented for her engagement party. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, casting light on gowns worth more than cars, on tuxedos tailored to perfection. Waiters glided past with silver trays of champagne, while a string quartet played music that sounded like it belonged in a movie. And me? I stood in my pressed white shirt, dark jeans, and polished work boots. Not fancy, not expensive, but honest. I had promised myself I wouldn't lie about who I was. Tonight was Emma's chance to show me whether she valued truth or image. She greeted me at the entrance with a practiced smile. Her dress shimmered, $12,000 of Oscar de la Renta, but her hug was stiff, her words colder. Dad, you came. Of course I came, I said softly. It's your engagement party. Her eyes darted down to my clothes. Her jaw tightened. We need to talk before you meet anyone important. I followed her toward a corner near the bar. The hum of guests filled the air like static. She leaned close, her voice sharp. Dad, you need to understand something tonight. These people, Bradley's family, the Ashworths, they're powerful. They can open doors. If you embarrass me... I held up a hand. Emma, I didn't come here to embarrass you. I came here because I'm your father. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Then help me. Just say you're in development, project development. Don't say construction foreman, please. I studied her face. Desperation flickered in her eyes. Development, I repeated. She nodded quickly. It sounds more professional. Trust me, Dad, just tonight. Before I could answer, a couple approached. Richard and Caroline Ashworth, wealth dripping from their smiles, their jewelry, their presence. Emma's entire posture shifted as if she were on stage. Emma! Caroline air-kissed both her cheeks. The party looks absolutely divine. Emma's voice rose into a higher, polished register. Caroline, Richard, I'm so glad you could make it. I'd like you to meet my father. I extended my hand. Jake Williams, nice to meet you. Richard's grip was firm, his eyes scanning me like a resume. And what line of work are you in, Jake? Emma hesitated for 3 seconds. I felt the weight of the silence. Then she smiled quickly. Dad's in development, project development. Richard nodded approvingly. Excellent. What kind of development? Commercial? Residential? Emma jumped in before I could answer. Large-scale projects. Very complex. Lots of moving parts. Technically true. Completely misleading. I looked at Emma, her smile tight, her hand resting on Richard's arm as if clinging to his approval. I cleared my throat. Actually, I should clarify something. I'm a construction foreman. I supervise building projects. Bridges, highways, hospitals. That's what I do. The temperature around our little circle dropped 10 degrees. Richard's polite smile faltered. Caroline's voice took on that careful tone people use when discussing unpleasant truths. How nice. Manual labor is so important. Within 60 seconds, they excused themselves. Emma's hand shot out, gripping my arm. Her eyes burned. What was that? She hissed. That was honesty, I said. No, she snapped, her voice sharp and low. That was sabotage. Do you have any idea what you just did? Richard could have opened doors for Bradley's business. Caroline donates millions to charities, and you threw it away because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. I pulled my arm back. My voice stayed calm. I didn't sabotage anything. I refused to lie about who I am. Her lips pressed tight, her voice shaking. You made me look small. I leaned closer. No, Emma. I made myself look honest. The only one making you small is you. Her eyes darted around the ballroom, scanning for witnesses, desperate to regain control. She forced a smile and stepped back. We'll talk later, she muttered, already turning toward another group of guests. I stood there, feeling the weight of every chandelier, every polished glance, every judgment in the room. For years I had stayed silent, swallowing her insults, letting her shape me into her shame. But not tonight. Tonight, I drew the line. As I turned toward the terrace to catch my breath, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I stepped outside, the night air cool against my face, and answered. Mr. Williams, this is Jennifer from the office. Sorry to call during your family event, but Forbes is asking to schedule your interview for next month's industry feature. Should I confirm? I froze, staring back through the glass doors at my daughter laughing with her guests, still unaware of who I really was. Yes, I said evenly. Confirm it, and make sure they spell the company name correctly this time. Wilson Construction Group, not Williams. Jennifer's voice was crisp. Absolutely, sir. I ended the call, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and exhaled. Emma thought she knew my worth. Tonight she was about to find out just how wrong she was. What kind of foreman gets calls from Forbes? Emma's voice cut through the night as sharp as broken glass. She had followed me onto the terrace, where the city lights glittered like jewels scattered across the dark hills. Inside, the music played on, laughter spilling from the ballroom. But out here it was just us, father and daughter, standing on the edge of truth. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, keeping my voice steady. Work calls me at night, Emma, on weekends. That's part of the job. Her eyes narrowed. Don't play games with me. No foreman has an assistant calling about interviews with Forbes. So tell me, what are you hiding? I leaned against the railing, staring out at the skyline I had spent decades helping to build. Bridges, office towers, freeways. Most people saw only lights. I saw years of sweat, blueprints, and crews that trusted me to lead. Some jobs are more complicated than you think, I said quietly. Emma's heels clicked against the stone as she stepped closer, her voice rising. Complicated? Dad, you pour concrete. How complicated can it be? I stayed silent. Sometimes silence reveals more than any confession. Before I could answer, Bradley appeared with another couple in tow. "There you are, Jake. I want you to meet Harrison and Melissa Parker." Harrison was about my age, silver hair, hands rough with old calluses, signs of a man who had actually worked for his place in the world. He shook my hand firmly. "Jake Williams, right? Bradley tells me you're in construction." "That's right," I said. Harrison's eyes lit with curiosity. "What kind of projects?" "Infrastructure, mostly. Bridges, highways, commercial buildings." Emma tensed beside me. I could almost feel her nails digging into her palm. "Which company?" Harrison asked. I paused, then said simply, "Wilson Construction Group." Harrison's reaction was instant. His smile widened. "No kidding? Wilson Construction? You work for Jake Wilson?" Emma let out a breath of relief, clearly expecting me to nod and confirm I was just an employee. But Harrison didn't wait for me. His voice carried enough excitement to draw the attention of nearby guests. "That man's a legend. Built the company from nothing into a $3 billion empire. Won the contract for the new convention center downtown, $800 million. Fastest growing infrastructure firm in the country." Emma blinked rapid. Confusion flickering across her face. Melissa Parker chimed in, her voice reverent. "Forbes listed him in the top 200 wealthiest Americans. Self-made billionaire. Jake Wilson changed the industry. I didn't move. I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I just let the words hang in the cool night air." Emma's voice came out small, almost breaking. "Dad, is it true?" I turned slowly to look at her. Her expensive dress shimmered under the terrace lights, her perfect makeup barely masking the cracks in her composure. "What do you think, Emma?" I asked softly. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Harrison clapped me on the shoulder. "This man doesn't just pour concrete, Emma. He built this city." Gasps rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. The same people who'd politely dismissed me minutes earlier now leaned forward, eager for confirmation. I gave them nothing, just silence. Emma's lips trembled. "All these years, and you never told me?" I held her gaze. "Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I have." The color drained from her face. For the first time that evening, she was speechless. The quiet was broken by the sharp click of heels against stone. Margaret Davis appeared at my side, briefcase in hand, her expression calm but purposeful. The guests parted instinctively, giving her space. "Jake," she said politely, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but this can't wait." Emma turned toward her, clearly rattled. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" Margaret adjusted her glasses, her voice even. "I'm here about your inheritance, Emma. We need to discuss your compliance with the conditions." Emma blinked, panic flashing in her eyes. "What conditions?" Margaret's gaze was steady. "The ones you've been violating. Tonight, in fact." The chatter from the ballroom seemed to fade. The terrace went still, every eye turned toward Emma. Margaret Steen hopped closer, her voice sharp as a gavel. "We need to talk. Tonight. If respect means pretending pouring concrete is a career, I don't want the inheritance." Emma's voice rang out across the terrace, loud enough to slice through the music drifting from the ballroom. Heads turned. Guests who had been sipping champagne now froze, eyes snapping toward us. The air grew tight, the kind of silence where everyone is listening, but no one dares breathe. Margaret Davis stood beside me, her briefcase open, documents ready. She had warned Emma to step aside, to talk privately. But Emma had chosen defiance. "Emma," Margaret said firmly, "this is not the place." Emma cut her off, her face flushed, her words sharp. "No, this is the place. I'm tired of being told how to live my life by people who don't understand what I've built. You want honesty? Fine. Here it is. I've created a life worth living, surrounded myself with people who know success, people who appreciate real achievement, not manual labor, not concrete." Her hand slashed through the air like a knife, every syllable struck deeper. My chest tightened, but I forced my voice steady. "Emma, I've worked my whole life to give you stability, to raise you after your mother died, and you stand here saying my career, my sacrifices, aren't real?" Her laugh was cold. "Dad, you drive an old truck. You wear work boots to formal events. You don't belong in this world, and I'm done apologizing for you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guests shifted uncomfortably. but Emma was only warming up. If honoring some dusty inheritance clause means I have to pretend that pouring concrete is a career, she spat, then maybe I don't want the inheritance at all. Margaret's expression hardened. She pulled out a folder, her voice ringing clear. Emma, the Inheritance Review Committee has already received evidence, texts, photographs, recordings, demonstrating your pattern of disrespect toward your father. Tonight's performance only confirms it. Emma's face drained of color, then flared red again as she realized what Margaret was saying. Evidence? From who? From him? She jabbed a finger toward me, her voice shrill. Of course. He's jealous. He's trying to ruin me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. No, Emma. You ruined yourself. Every time you introduced me as the help. Every time you apologized for my hands. Every time you told me I didn't belong. Her breathing quickened. The mask of poise she wore in Beverly Hills society cracked under the weight of truth. Finally, she shouted, You're no longer welcome in my life, not at my home, not at my events, not in my world. Do you hear me? You're nothing to me now. The words should have broken me, but instead I felt something else. Relief, a quiet triumph, because Emma had just sealed her own fate in front of 200 witnesses. Margaret closed her folder with finality. Very well. Based on tonight's statements, the committee will proceed with revocation. You will have 72 hours to return all assets purchased with inheritance funds. The penthouse, the cars, the jewelry, everything. Emma's jaw dropped. Her voice faltered. You can't. Oh, we can, Margaret said evenly. And we will. The terrace buzzed with whispers. Faces that once smiled at Emma now turned wary, calculating. She had just confessed she didn't value the very fortune that gave her status. She looked around, desperate for rescue, and that's when Harrison Parker stepped forward. His voice carried across the stunned crowd. Emma, he said firmly, you should know something about your father. She tried to cut him off. Harrison, please. But he ignored her. He turned to the guests, raising his voice so all could hear. This man you just humiliated? Jake Williams isn't just a construction worker. He's Jake Wilson, founder and CEO of Wilson Construction Group, a man who built half of Los Angeles, a man whose company is worth billions. The crowd gasped as one, the sound sharp as a crack of thunder. Emma's face went pale, her lips parting in disbelief. Dad, is that true? I looked at her steadily, letting the silence stretch. The mask had fallen, and she wasn't ready for what she was about to see. By Wednesday it was all gone. The penthouse, the Bentley, the jewelry she had flaunted like armor. Piece by piece, Emma's new life collapsed, and it all came down to this moment. I sat in Margaret Davis's office, high above downtown Los Angeles. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the city I had spent decades building. Bridges, freeways, office towers, all projects my company had touched. Thousands of workers had left their fingerprints on this skyline. Mine were among them. The conference table between us was stacked with paperwork. Legal notices, official letters, copies of inheritance clauses Emma had chosen to ignore. Margaret placed one final folder in front of me, her expression calm but serious. Jake, she said, folding her hands, the committee's decision is unanimous. Your daughter violated the inheritance terms. The funds and assets revert to the estate immediately. I let her words settle. I had expected them, yet hearing them aloud felt heavier than I imagined. Margaret slid a single-page document across the polished wood. This form, she explained, authorizes the funds to transfer back into your name as the surviving family member. All you have to do is sign. I stared at the paper. $33 million sat there in black ink, waiting for my pen. $33 million, I repeated under my breath. Enough to buy every luxury Emma thought defined her. Enough to make me richer than I already was. Enough to prove a point in the cruelest way possible. Margaret studied me. Jake, I need to ask, do you want to claim it? I leaned back, fingers resting on the arms of my chair. What happens if I don't? Her eyes flicked to another document. If you decline, the funds will be placed into a charitable trust. Your late wife's grandmother specified children's charities as the backup beneficiaries, scholarships, hospitals, youth programs. The committee would distribute it by Friday. For a moment, silence filled the room. The hum of the city outside seemed louder, like the noise of traffic rising to fill the gap between us. Margaret broke it. Jake, are you sure? $33 million is not a small decision. I shook my head slowly. I never wanted the money. Not then. Not now. She tilted her head, waiting. I picked up the pen, held it for a second, then placed it back on the table without signing. Let it go to the children. Let it build something real. Money should lift people up, not break families apart. Margaret nodded once, but her eyes softened. Your wife would have been proud of that choice. I smiled faintly. Rebecca always believed character was worth more than inheritance. Now Emma will learn that the hard way. Margaret made a note in her file, her pen scratching across the page. Very well. The trust will be established by Friday morning. I stood, adjusting the cuffs of my shirt, the weight on my chest lighter than when I had walked in. For weeks I had carried anger, humiliation, and betrayal. But now it felt like peace. As I reached the door, Margaret called after me. Jake? Yes? Her eyes met mine. She'll call. They always do. I didn't answer. Because Margaret was right. Emma had already called 17 times since the night of the party. She left voicemails that swung from furious denial to broken sobs. She begged, pleaded, shouted. She promised she could change. But begging doesn't erase years of disrespect, and it doesn't undo the words that still echo in my chest. Not anymore, Dad. Not in my world. Her Bentley was the first to go. I heard about it before I saw it. A friend called to say they'd witnessed the tow truck pulling it away from a Beverly Hills cafe, Emma standing on the sidewalk in disbelief as passers-by snapped photos on their phones. By the time the video hit social media, her humiliation had gone viral in circles she once ruled. That was just the beginning. Within days, foreclosure notices appeared on the door of her penthouse. The bank froze her accounts. Credit cards declined at restaurants where she used to leave $1,000 tips. The jewelry, the designer handbags, the vacations, all gone in the space of a week. I didn't rejoice in it. I didn't dance on her ashes. But I won't lie. I felt a grim sense of balance. The world has a way of correcting arrogance. And then Bradley broke. He came to me, suit rumpled, eyes pleading. Jake, he began, voice low. You know I love Emma, but this is a lot. The inheritance was part of our future. The house, the business connections, the travel. Without it, I cut him off with a raised hand. Say it plainly, Bradley. His jaw tightened. She's not the woman I plan to marry anymore. I leaned back in my chair. Or she's exactly who she's always been. You just don't like the price tag now. He flinched at my words but didn't argue. Instead, he tried another angle. Look, could you help her? Just enough to get her back on her feet? Alone, maybe? You could make this go away quietly. My answer was simple. No. Bradley blinked. No? No, I repeated, steady as stone. She needs to learn. Propping her up now would rob her of the very lesson life is trying to teach. His shoulders sagged, and without another word, he walked out of my life, and hers. News spread quickly. Invitations dried up. The Ashworths, once so welcoming, turned colder than marble. Caroline crossed the street to avoid her. Richard shook his head in disappointment when Emma tried to speak at a charity gala, only to be quietly escorted out. The friends who once clung to her for status now treated her like a stain on their reputation. It hurt to watch more than I cared to admit, because behind all her arrogance, all her cruelty, Emma was still my little girl, and no father is to see his child crushed under the weight of her own choices. But I stayed silent. I kept my boundaries. Every day, a new piece of her empire collapsed. The penthouse emptied, furniture hauled out by men in gray uniforms. I drove past once just to see, and caught a glimpse of Emma standing in the doorway, hair unkempt, eyes hollow, as her chandeliers disappeared into a moving truck. I parked half a block away and sat there, gripping the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to step out, to gather her up, to tell her it would be okay. But another part, the part that remembered years of disrespect, kept me in my seat. The hardest thing I've ever done as a father wasn't raising her alone. It wasn't working 3 jobs after Rebecca died. It wasn't even swallowing the shame she hurled at me in front of strangers. The hardest thing was doing nothing, letting her fall. One by one, the consequences landed, sharp and brutal, and for the first time in her life there was no safety net waiting to catch her. Not from me, not from anyone. People asked me if I felt vindicated. Some even congratulated me on teaching her a lesson, but I didn't feel victory. I felt the slow, grinding ache of a man who knew love sometimes means stepping back instead of stepping in. Then, one night, as the quiet settled over my modest Pasadena home, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, Emma. Her makeup was gone, her dress plain, her eyes rimmed red from crying. She stood on my porch like a stranger, shoulders slumped, voice trembling. For the first time in years, she didn't look like the daughter who left me behind. She looked like the little girl who once held my hand on the first day of school. And all she said was, "Dad, I don't know where else to go." She looked smaller somehow in jeans instead of jewels. Emma stood on my Pasadena porch, arms crossed as if she were holding herself together, her once manicured nails bitten down, her makeup washed away. For the first time in years, she wasn't wrapped in diamonds or draped in silk. She was just my daughter. "Dad," she whispered, voice trembling, "I don't know where else to go." I didn't answer right away. I stepped aside, letting her in, the screen door creaking behind her. She glanced around the small living room, faded photographs on the mantel, the same couch she used to sprawl across when she was a teenager. Nothing had changed here, except her. She sank onto the couch and buried her face in her hands. "I've lost everything," she said, her words muffled. "The penthouse, the car, the friends, even Bradley. They're all gone." I sat in my chair across from her, folding my arms. "Maybe you didn't lose them, Emma. Maybe you drove them away." Her head snapped up, eyes wet. "Don't you think I know that? Don't you think I replay every horrible thing I said to you? Every time I treated you like a burden?" She swallowed hard. "Dad, I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of who I became." For a moment, silence stretched between us. I studied her face, stripped of arrogance, stripped of defense. But scars don't fade easily, and mine ran deep. "You begged me to lie for you," I said evenly. "You asked me to hide who I was because it embarrassed you." "I know," she whispered, "and I was wrong. I thought money and status made me better, but when the money disappeared, so did everyone else. You were the only one who stayed, even when I screamed that I didn't want you in my life." Her voice cracked, and for the first time in years, I saw not the woman she tried to be, but the child I had raised. "I need your forgiveness, Dad," she said. "I don't deserve it, but I need it." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Emma, let me ask you something. If I were still only a foreman, just a man in boots with dirt under his nails, would you want me in your life?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. "You see," I said softly, "that's the truth. You wanted the father you could reshape to fit your world, not the father who raised you." Her shoulders shook as tears slid down her cheeks. "I don't want that anymore. I just want you. I want the man who taught me to ride a bike, the man who stayed up all night when I was sick. I want my dad back, even if it's too late." The anger in me fought against the softness creeping in. Part of me wanted to hold on to the hurt, to remind her of every insult, every betrayal. But another part, a deeper, quieter part, remembered the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest, who once believed her dad could fix anything. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Emma, forgiveness doesn't erase what you did, and it doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. Trust has to be earned." She nodded quickly, desperate. "I'll earn it. I'll do anything. I've started working, just part-time at a bookstore, but I'm learning. For the first time in my life, I'm living without the crutch of money, and it's hard, but maybe that's the point." Her words were raw, unpolished. For once, she wasn't performing. She was confessing. I watched her carefully, searching for cracks of deception, but all I saw was a young woman who had finally been stripped down to truth. The clock ticked on the wall. The house smelled faintly of coffee and sawdust. Outside, the street was quiet, just the hum of distant traffic. And in that stillness, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. Emma wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. "Dad, could we share one dinner? Just one. No arguments, no past, just you and me." I didn't swear right away, I looked at her, the daughter who had broken me and maybe was trying to mend me. One dinner. Could I risk opening that door again? Could I risk the hope? I stood slowly, crossing to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water, taking my time. Then I turned back to her. I haven't decided, I said quietly, and the truth was, I hadn't. 6 months later, she called again, not for money, but for pride. Her voice was different this time, softer, steadier, no polished performance, no entitlement tucked between the words. Just a daughter, reaching for her father. "Dad," she said, "would you come by? I want to show you something." I drove to the address she gave me, a modest apartment on the east side of Pasadena, the kind of place where the rent was reasonable, the hallways smelled faintly of detergent, and neighbors waved because they actually knew each other. It wasn't her penthouse, not by a mile, but somehow it felt more honest. Emma greeted me at the door in jeans and a sweatshirt, hair pulled back in a simple bun. She looked younger, stripped of the layers of pride that once weighed her down. "Come in," she said nervously. The apartment was small, sparsely furnished, but tidy. A thrift store table stood in the center of the living room, set with 2 plates. The smell of roasted chicken drifted from the kitchen. I blinked in surprise. "You cooked?" I asked. Her cheeks flushed. "I'm learning. Nothing fancy, just chicken and potatoes, but I wanted you to taste something I made myself." I sat, watching her move about the kitchen. She wasn't commanding staff or handing orders. She was bussing her own plates, stirring her own pot. Every movement felt like part of her apology, unspoken but clear. Over dinner, she told me about her new job. "It's just a nonprofit downtown. We work with housing support. I file papers, answer phones. Sometimes I get to help with community events." She smiled faintly. "I take the bus most days. It's different, but I like it." For the first time, her voice carried no shame in the word different. I studied her carefully, trying to see if this was a mask, but her eyes, tired maybe but steady, held no deceit. She set down her fork. "Dad, I've been thinking about everything, about who I was, and I'm not asking you to forget it. I just want a chance to be better." I leaned back, folding my arms. "Emma, forgiveness isn't pretending the past didn't happen. It's remembering and choosing to move forward anyway. That's harder, but it's real." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time she didn't crumble. She nodded, taking the weight of my words. "I understand," she whispered. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight, but maybe, little by little, we can rebuild." The clock ticked softly on her wall. Outside, I could hear the faint rumble of a city bus pulling away. And in that modest room, for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt with Emma in so long: hope. We finished our meal in quiet conversation. She told me about volunteering at the food bank on weekends, about how humbling it felt to serve instead of being served. She told me about learning to budget, about burning her first pot of rice, about laughing at herself instead of pretending she was flawless. And I told her about my crew, about the new hospital wing we were building, about the pride I still carried in honest work. When it was time to leave, she walked me to the door. Her voice trembled slightly as she asked, "Dad, do you think someday we could have a family dinner? Just you and me, no pretense, just us." I studied her face. For years I had searched for respect in her eyes, and for years I had only seen shame. But tonight I saw something new, a fragile honesty, a humility I never thought she'd carry. I didn't promise her everything, I didn't offer the world, but I gave her the truth. "Emma," I said for the first time in years, I'm proud, not of what you had, but of who you're becoming. And for the first time she smiled, not like a woman clinging to status, but like a daughter who finally understood what love really meant. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned, one choice at a time. That truth echoed in me as I walked a job site one bright morning. The clang of steel, the rumble of machinery, the rhythm of hammers. It was music I'd known my whole life. Workers nodded as I passed, men and women in hard hats who didn't care about my net worth, only that I treated them fairly, that I respected their work as much as my own. And for the first time in years, I felt peace. Emma's life looked different now. Not glamorous, not gilded in luxury. She took the bus to her nonprofit office, packed her own lunches, and came home to a modest apartment instead of a penthouse with a view. Some nights she burned her dinner, some mornings she ran late for work, but she was living a life she earned, not one she inherited, and there was dignity in that. She still carried shame when she looked at me sometimes. I could see it in her eyes, the memory of the words she once hurled at me. The sting didn't vanish overnight, but little by little she was trying. She called on weekends, asked about my projects, told me about hers. I visited the food bank where she volunteered, watched her kneel to help a little boy carry a bag of canned goods too heavy for his arms, and in that moment, I saw something no inheritance could buy: compassion. Meanwhile, the $33 million she lost didn't return to me. It went where it was meant to go all along, into the hands of children's charities. The Morrison Trust redirected every dollar into schools, clinics, housing for families who had nothing. I read about scholarships being awarded in her grandmother's name, about new community centers opening in neighborhoods most of her old friends wouldn't set foot in. Emma saw those stories too. She didn't flinch. When she realized the money she had squandered on clothes and champagne was now building playgrounds and putting kids through college, she admitted one night over coffee, maybe that money finally ended up where it belonged. Maybe losing it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I didn't argue, because she was right. Still, the road between us was long. Forgiveness isn't a doorway you walk through once. It's a bridge you build slowly, plank by plank. Some days I trusted her steps. Some days I pulled back, still wary of the pain she'd caused. But we were walking toward each other, and that was enough. One evening, after a long day at the site, she joined me for dinner in my modest home. We sat at the old wooden table, plates of simple food between us. No chandeliers, no champagne, just father and daughter, sharing space again. She put down her fork, looking at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in years. Dad, I may never undo the damage I caused, but I want to spend the rest of my life trying. I held her gaze, feeling the weight of her sincerity. Then I said the words I knew she needed and that I was finally ready to give. Emma, forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it can build a future. Let's build one together. Her eyes filled, and for the first time since her mother died, I saw the little girl who used to run into my arms. Now, when I think about everything we went through, the insults, the betrayal, the humiliation, I realize it all led to this truth. Money doesn't define worth. Dignity does. Respect does. Love does. I've seen men with nothing but grit in their hands carry more honor than billionaires with diamonds in their pockets. And I've seen my own daughter lose $33 million only to gain something priceless: perspective. Justice had been served, not by me, but by life itself. And in that justice, I found calm strength. So is what I know now. You can inherit wealth, but you cannot inherit respect. You have to earn it, one choice at a time. Emma learned that the hard way. And in the ashes of her arrogance, she began to build something new. As I close this chapter of my life, I leave you with the lesson I lived to see proven true. When you learn to love people for who they are, not what they own, that's when you finally grow up.